Are you perhaps thinking about bringing your e-commerce brand global, starting to sell in a new country, a new market? And if you're wondering how to adapt your paid advertising strategies for international success, then stick around. The world is your oyster, but cracking the international market isn't as simple as translating your ads. So in today's video, we're diving deeper into how to tailor your paid ad campaigns to different cultures and markets. And if you're new to the channel, my name is Justin. I'm the founder at paidadvertising.com, an e-commerce marketing agency specializing in elevating thriving brands by simplifying e-commerce growth. So the first point I want to talk today is understanding the market nuances. So before we get into anything else, I actually want to bring up a slight case study on screen right now. So you'll see actually two screenshots, both from the same client account that we are running at the agency. So they're both from the current month to date, so October 1st to October 13th, and they both compare two completely different markets. So that client is selling in Australia as well as in the US. And you can see that the results are different. So is the ad spend, so is the amount of campaigns, and newsflash, so are the products advertised. So that client I made a video about a few weeks back. And in that video, I explained how having different markets will require us to have essentially different offerings and products in our ads. They have the same website. So if you look at it, both the AU and the US website is the exact same. The only thing that changes is the bestsellers page, where the ordered products is different, because in fact, the bestsellers are different in both of these markets. But looking at that, one of the markets essentially, which is the Australian market, since the start of October, we spent $4,400 and brought back $12,900 for an overall ROAS of 2.92. And if we look at the US market, in that same time period, we spent a little bit more than half of the same ad spend. Let's just say about 60% of the same spend, so 2,500, but brought back 6,900, which is basically a little less than half at this point. So we're at about 2.7 for that market. You can see that one, ROAS is lower. Not only is ROAS lower, it's lower on a lower amount of ad spend, which technically shows you that those markets definitely aren't up to par. And if I had opened up, as an example, triple wall, well, you would also see that from a triple wall perspective, stats are completely different. Like click-through rate, AOV, products sold, new customer revenue, they're not the same on both stores. And funnily enough, going back to the AU market, you can see that the click-through rate is 1.78% with a $9 CPM. On the US market, click-through rate is 2.4%. There's a lot more clicks, but CPM is $12, which means it costs more. So it costs more to get the same amount of impressions, but more people click, which is great. But yet again, if we actually went on the website, you would see that the website conversion rate is actually about 50 to 60% less on the US website than it is on the Australian website. This is how different two markets can be. And this is why it's important to research the nuances of both of these markets. There's a few other videos on the channel where I go more in depth about how to do market research. But again, if you're new to the channel, just a quick recap. Usually what I would do is I would compile data into a single Google Doc. I would basically use it as an info dump where all the information I can find on my customers' reviews, their product page descriptions, their ad copies that have worked the best. Same thing for the competitors, right? So any product reviews from similar competitors or products, I would dump all of that within the same document. And from there, I would actually feed that information to ChatGPT and then ask ChatGPT questions about my audience. If I was doing that on two different markets, well, I would do two different threads on ChatGPT with two different info dumps. And I would research two different styles of brands. So I would not take an American brand, if I'm an Australian brand as an example, to compare, let's say, their customer reviews, the products that they sell the best, because it is wrong to assume that whatever sells best for them would also be what sells best for me. And that kind, again, the top 5 products sold are different on both stores. There's only one product that overlaps on both stores, but the rest is completely different. In fact, it's funny because the best-selling product on both of the stores is a combo. It's actually a bundle of multiple products together. And the bundle is not even the same on either or, which again, is quite interesting. Another thing to understand in the market nuances might be trends. Right? So if you look as an example on TikTok, there might be trends that originate from the US versus some that originate from Australia. Some that never move out of the country, right? Stuff that is so local to Australia, the US audience will never resonate with it. So it's good to use politics and trends in order to spice up your ads initially, which again will be different depending on the market. And to move on to point number 2, which is language and cultural sensitivities. Well, one of the things that we noticed for that specific client is that the UGC creator type wasn't the same in the US versus Australia. African American creators perform best in the US versus pretty much any creator. We haven't really found a trend in the Australian market, but just to say that the type of creators was a big differentiating factor in the performance across most of these markets. And that is something that I would qualify as being a cultural sensitivity. So talking about that as an example, in the US, there's 12.1% of the US, which is African American. If you look at Australia, only 1.7% of Australia is from African descent. So it shows you again, why is it that African American creators seem to work best in the US than they do in Australia? It's because of the population. The people don't resonate as much in Australia, probably because there's less of that same population. I'll also mix that point with a personal experience of mine with kind of legal considerations and platform restrictions for you to be mindful of, which do differ per countries. That wouldn't necessarily be the case for US and Australia, at least not for that client that I have in mind right now. That's I've showed you the results earlier in this video. But in the past, I worked with a clothing brand, and that clothing brand was advertising in the Middle East as well as advertising in the US. And they were advertising more specifically on TikTok. The sexual or kind of skin showing policies for women's clothing are entirely different in the US than they are in the Middle East. Our ads would get flagged for either sexual content or showing too much skin for somebody dressed very regularly. Let's just put it that way from an American or Canadian standpoint. And that yet again is a cultural difference, and there are restrictions per country. Another is CBD. I've worked with a few CBD based brands like topical CBD for the most part, so skincare CBD brands. Well, that too has its own restrictions. There's specific states, specific provinces, let's say in Canada, that allow it. There's specific countries that do and specific countries that don't. So it's very divided in terms of the countries and even regions within countries with which you can advertise. Now, moving on to currency and payment methods. Well, as an example, I've also consulted brands in, again, the Middle East and brands also in Latin American market. Both of these, a commonality I've noticed is that a few brands offer cash on delivery, not for the same reasons. In the Latin American market, it seems to be more from a trust perspective that people feel they can kind of trust more with, again, paying cash on delivery. I've seen that a handful of times. And in the Middle East, from what I've been told, at least by these brands, it's purely out of a buying power perspective. The people have much more money and credit cards are less used, and therefore they just want to pay cash. So cash on delivery is a payment method that you would not see in the US nor in Canada. You don't have that, right? We always pay with a credit card or perhaps PayPal or even a debit card for that matter. But we don't just wait until the item shows up at our house with the mailman asking, hey, give me cash right now. That just doesn't happen, right? So it's also good and important to adapt those payment methods. Same thing as payment methods like Afterpay or Sezzle, which aren't available globally, once again, which makes sense as an example to offer to a North American market, but might not make the same sense for, let's say, the Latin American market, right? It really depends on the availability of these payment methods. Now I'll move on to platform preferences, which I've also noticed a difference. So depending on the countries, you'll see a different budget split in terms of either Facebook or Instagram if you're advertising on automatic placements on Facebook, or you'll see as an example a certain country responding much better to TikTok than another. And that again is commonalities that you'll spot across different markets, which even within a market, if you're a seasoned advertiser, you would know that different platforms are usually better for different demographics. Like Facebook's much better for an older demographic, Instagram's better for the average demographic, and TikTok for a younger demographic. That's kind of given, right? But in an international market, you will also see these differences appearing, which kind of leads me to my final point, which is tracking and analytics, which in my opinion, it's also becoming increasingly hard to properly track and attribute sales when you sell in more than one market. Because here's the thing, a lot of brands, once they first start expanding to new markets, they'll just have one Shopify store. They'll have kind of all the inventory at the same spot, and then basically they'll have like a much higher shipping fee for international customers, but they don't really care because they're still like, they're 1 foot in, 1 foot out type of thing. I've seen that really often where somebody sells mostly, let's say within the UK, they're expanding to the US, and they're kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Shipping is more expensive. It also takes more time in the US, but it's like, they don't really care as much because they're not trying to really dominate that market. But at some point, a lot of people now will split the Shopify stores. They'll have different stores, even though they might be linked on the back end. So let's say they have Shopify Plus, inventory is going to be linked in the back end, but the front of the store is going to be different. The URL therefore will be different. It could just be, let's say, a subdomain, but nonetheless, it would appear as a different URL, which means from a tracking perspective, especially if you're using something like TripleWall, it becomes increasingly harder because at that point, you would have to have 2 TripleWall accounts. And then on both accounts, you see the total ad spend for that channel, but you don't see the total sales, right? Because let's say, and I'm talking again from a real live scenario right now of one of our clients that was in the UK expanding to the US, and I'm gonna put screenshots for you to see right now on screen. Both of them, you see the ad spend. Then both of the markets, you see certain sales associated to certain campaigns, which are most advertised in that given market. So ROAS will always look lower that way because ad spend is always higher, right? Ad spend is duplicated because, again, both stores will report the full amount of ad spend. That said, that's what I mean is that from a tracking and analytics perspectives, it becomes a little harder when you have more than one market. Not impossible to track by any means. One of the ways to do so with TripleWell is to have like both stores linked under a pod, so that way you can kind of see your pod stats. Helps, but I personally wish that it would become easier for platforms like, again, TripleWell, Northbeam, Hyros, and such to make it more readily available for brands that advertise in different markets and have different kind of subsets of their stores to track in a more efficient manner, if that makes sense. So if you're looking to go global with your ads, what I would say is first and foremost, adapt your strategy. Don't just go global. I see that is where I think a lot of brands are doing a mistake, is they'll just say like, all right, fuck it, let's go global. So let's launch some ads in the US. There's literally nothing else changed on the brand. Organic isn't changed. The website isn't changed. Nothing changes. They're just trying to expand to a new market. It's not how it works. New market means pretty much a new subset of your brand. Sometimes the website has to be slightly different. Sometimes your messaging has to be different. As mentioned earlier, the products advertised have to be different. The creative types perhaps have to be different. And in some cases, the jump is just much bigger than people imagine. I find that most common with people in smaller countries that try to go to the US. Everybody at some point wants to go to the US. That's like the holy grail for most international brands. I've worked many times with brands, let's say from the French part of Canada, right? Quebec, where I've worked with a lot of brands from Europe and seen brands also from the Latin American market trying to go to the US. And every time they kind of have the same pushback from the market. Website's not good enough. Conversion rate plummets. The ads are just not hitting anymore. The same products don't seem to sell. That's normal. The market sophistication is entirely different. If you're about to move to a new market, if you're going global, if you're expanding to a new country, redo your entire plan. Make sure you're going to have an entire funnel, which means ads, website, organic, email, tailored to that market. Number two is, it's a subset of number one, I guess, but do proper research once again. Do a whole new research plan. Again, I kind of do extensive research for my customers' persona, their age, their desire, their pain points, their fears, their daily activities, emotions, and do a different research document for both markets. Then from there, don't assume the same products are going to sell. You're going to have to go into product testing phases once again when expanding to a new market. And then finally, slowly start scaling, right? I think it's really a gradual process if you're trying to do that. And again, my main takeaway here is do not just assume your products, if they're winning in your local market, they're going to win in an international market, especially the US. 99% of people fail at expanding to the US because they just treat it like their local market. And I'm telling you, the other way around probably is better. Like if you're a US brand trying to, I don't know, extend yourself to a smaller market, that I think is a much better play than doing the other way around, because the other way around is much harder to do. What I'm saying essentially is that if you start with the US, you basically build your brand on hardcore mode. Like if you're a gamer like I used to be, basically you start the game on a hardcore mode. Whereas if you do that, if you do the same brand in like a local market, it's kind of a rookie mode. So you build rookie and then you're gonna immediately go from being used to playing rookie to playing hardcore. So you're gonna be like, holy shit, nothing of what I did in the past has worked. And it's much harder. My website has to be sharper. I have to be sharper with my organic, versus when you do the opposite. Well, you played hardcore pretty much all your life and now you go to rookie. It's just like, all right, it's a piece of cake. I've got a document linked down below in our free school community, which actually walks you through a little bit about our research process. So I've been talking a lot about it today and how we do research before running ads. So check this out and you can basically replicate that same process based on the different countries by which you will want to advertise in. And if you're watching this video, you are an e-commerce brand owner making at least $25,000 a month with your brand, click the link below and book in a call to speak with our team today. So I'd love to be able to run your ads and help you kind of in this global market process. And on that note, I'm going to wish you an amazing day. Check out other videos on the channel for some more useful marketing tips. Peace out.